Chapter 181. Astonished. The people in the Su family's hall were taken aback by Yi Li's words. They didn't understand why Yi Li would say such things. Mr. Yi, are you suggesting? Lu Xinghe, the head of the Lu family, looked at Yi Li thoughtfully. Yi Li didn't say much. Instead, he released the Apocalypse Legion from the system space. Da, Bai Wawa, Hongye, and Yutong stood beside Yi Li. They all had different appearances, but there was one thing they had in common. Their eyes were all red. How was that possible? Shocked, utterly shocked. The family heads in the Su family's hall were so frightened that they quickly retreated. Suddenly, 4 7th-tier zombies appeared before them. How could they not be scared? Well, Su Yao and Lu Xinghe widened their eyes. Even in their wildest dreams, they would never have expected to witness such a scene. Yi Li wasn't surprised by their shock. After all, 4 7th-tier zombies suddenly appearing would shock anyone. Now you understand why the recruiters from the Cloud Peak Academy thought Qingxue colluded with the Dark Race, Yi Li said calmly. Elder Su was also frightened. He couldn't believe his eyes as he looked at Yi Li. Mr. Yi, are you really from the Dark Race? Everyone knew that only the Dark Race could control zombies. Elder Su wasn't the only one who thought this. All the family heads in the Su family's hall believed Yi Li was from the Dark Race. However, they clearly remembered that when Yi Li was at Huangjiang Academy, he used golden aura, which corresponded to the talent color of an SSS-level genetic warrior. Everyone knew that the Dark Race didn't have genetic talents. The Dark Race? Yi Li smiled faintly. Do you think I, Yi Li, would belong to the lowly Dark Race? As soon as these words were spoken, the family heads in the Su family's hall were all astonished. They quickly looked at Yi Li. Yes, how could an SSS-level genetic warrior who could use golden aura possibly belong to the Dark Race? But if he wasn't from the Dark Race, how could he control zombies, especially 4 7th-tier zombies? Mr. Yi, are you a human or? Elder Su looked at Yi Li. Fundamentally, he naturally didn't believe that Yi Li was from the Dark Race. Yi Li had saved his life, and at Huangjiang Academy, Yi Li had even used a golden light that the Dark Race didn't possess. But if Yi Li was a human, then I'm neither human nor from the Dark Race, I'm a demon, Yi Li said slowly. When Yi Li transmigrated here, he was originally a human. However, since cultivating the ancient devil tome, he was no longer just human. A demon? The family heads in the Su family's hall exchanged glances. This was the first time they had heard the term demon. Mr. Yi, what is a demon? Su Yao felt relieved after knowing that Yi Li wasn't from the Dark Race. He also understood that Yi Li didn't have any ill intentions, otherwise, there was no need to explain so much to them. After thinking for a moment, Yi Li said, you don't need to delve into what a demon is. Just know that demons are a level higher than the Dark Race. As soon as he said this, the family heads in the Su family's hall all understood. I understand, Mr. Yi. Demons and the Dark Race can both control zombies, but demons are good, while the Dark Race is evil, Su Yao said. The family heads found Su Yao's words not only reasonable but also logical. Elder Su stroked his white beard and nodded, a look of relief appearing on his face. Let's talk about the crisis of Pan City, Yi Li said slowly. Chapter 182. A document. Upon hearing Yi Li's words, Elder Su invited him to take a seat. After the family heads had all settled back into their seats, Elder Su turned to Yi Li and said, Mr. Yi, currently there are tens of thousands of Dark Race members gathered in Pan City. According to our intelligence, most of these Dark Race members are in the 2nd or 3rd tier. Their leader is naturally a 7th-tier spirit soul, accompanied by 12 6th-tier Dark Race members and 124 5th-tier Dark Race members. At present, there are approximately 300,000 zombies in Pan City, all of them at levels 2 and 3. Our defense work is already in place, and we believe the 7th-tier spirit soul will soon issue the tier to attack the city. Yili thought about the massive horde of 300,000 zombies, which would provide a perfect opportunity for a frenzied synthesis. However, he wasn't sure if Huangjiang base city could hold up against them. After all, he was currently the strongest combat power in Huangjiang base city. If he chose to synthesize zombies, he wouldn't be able to fight. Even if he had the synthesized zombies attack other zombies, it would only be a temporary solution. The immense horde of zombies would quickly overpower the zombies he had produced. By the way, Mr. Yi, the power balance ratio between Huangjiang base city and the dark race in Pan City is 3-7, Elder Su said, looking at Yili. 3-7. Everyone knew how vast the disparity in strength was. However, the advantage was that the dark race was the attacking party. Huangjiang base city's outer defenses were strong, making it easy to defend and difficult to breach. Yili smiled faintly. There would probably be a massive zombie synthesis when the time came. Even if that was impossible, he could still unleash a fierce onslaught. During the trial in the Heavenly Tower, Yili obtained the Primordial Demon Slash, an S-level attack skill. He had yet to use it, but he would probably use it this time. As the Primordial Demon Slash was activated, 3,000 divine and demon illusions appeared. The scenery in that instant had begun to appeal to Yili. Speaking of the Heavenly Tower's trial, Yili had forgotten about the tower. In a critical moment, he had activated the tower, directly suppressing the dark race like Mount Tai. Mr. Yi, did you come to Huangjiang base city this time to help us? Lu Xinghe looked at Yili carefully and asked. Yes. Yili nodded. When the people in the Su family's hall heard this from Yili, they all displayed looks of joy. With Yili and the 4 7th-tier zombies joining the fray, the overall strength of their side undoubtedly increased significantly. Elder Su also smiled, looking at Yili. Mr. Yi, both Suner and Xiaoqian have gone to the Cloud Peak Academy. By the way, Mr. Yi, do you know where Qingxue went? Lu Xinghe suddenly asked. After Yili agreed to help Huangjiang base city, the atmosphere in the hall had become more lively. The family heads even began to chat casually. Qingxue is safe with my friend, Yili said calmly. At that moment, a man in military attire appeared at the door. He shouted, "Report." Su Yao let the man in military attire enter. After he came in, he handed a document to Elder Su and then left the hall. The family heads all became solemn. They wanted to know if the dark race was preparing to attack the city. Elder Su looked at the document, his expression changing from solemn to grim. Clap. Elder Su slammed the table abruptly, his voice filled with anger. Xiao Tian, one never thought you would actually join the dark race. The family heads were all surprised by Elder Su's outburst, looking at him. They naturally knew that Elder Su had more to say. Chapter 183, Attack on Huangjiang base city. Xiao Tian. Xiao Tian was the former head of the Warrior Alliance in Huangjiang base city. After the defeat of the zombies' attack on Huangjiang base city, Xiao Tian had the idea to join the dark race. Xiao Tian shared this idea with Elder Su, but naturally Elder Su disagreed. The conflict escalated, and they eventually engaged in a heated fight. In that battle, Elder Su initially had the upper hand, but Xiao Tian used a treacherous move at a critical moment, causing Elder Su to be seriously injured. If it weren't for Yili, Elder Su would probably have met his demise by now. Dad, what's going on? Su Yao asked Elder Su. Humph. Elder Su gave a cold snort and said, according to the report, Xiao Tian has arrived in Pan City and is preparing to attack the city alongside the dark race. The family heads couldn't contain their anger upon hearing this. Huangjiang base city was initially peaceful, but now the Warrior Alliance headquarters wanted to establish branch alliances in various major base cities. Xiao Tian became the head of the Warrior Alliance in Huangjiang base city, effectively placing him above the top 3 families. The top 3 families were already unhappy with Xiao Tian, and now he was even attempting to align himself with the dark race. How could they tolerate that? Elder Su, since Xiao Tian is preparing to attack us with the dark race, then we shouldn't let him leave alive. Lu Xinghe spoke coldly. Yi Li smirked secretly, thinking that things were getting more and more interesting. 3 days later, the 7th-tier spirit soul of the dark race in Pan City finally led the attack on Huangjiang Base City. Tens of thousands of dark race members and a horde of 300,000 zombies launched an assault on Huangjiang Base City. The dark race had aerial creatures known as the Strange Bird Tribe, which could spew dark fire. On the ground, there were giants, although they weren't excessively large due to their respective levels. The massive zombie horde employed a trapezoidal formation tactic, with zombies piling up against the city walls. Huangjiang Base City sounded the alarm, and millions of civilians took refuge in enormous shelters. Countless laser cannons on the outer walls of Huangjiang Base City fired incessantly. In the sky, fighter jets clashed with the strange bird tribe of the dark race. The number of zombies was simply overwhelming. The colossal horde charged like a landslide, causing the entire Huangjiang Base City to be on high alert. All the genetic warriors of Huangjiang Base City were frantically slaughtering zombies piled up on the walls. Boom! A strange bird spat out dark fire, sending the chilling flames hurtling towards the outer city wall. Hundreds of guards stationed there were instantly reduced to ashes by the flames. Suddenly, dozens of strange birds spewed dark fire, all aimed at the outer city wall. Make it rain. Yi Li commanded coldly. As he spoke, Alda triggered the rain element of his wind snow thunder lightning abilities. Instantly, heavy rain poured down, extinguishing the dark fire in an instant. Yi Li wielded the dragon-slaying blade, pointed his toe on the ground, and leaped into the air. Flame Blade Technique. With a heavy slash, the dragon-slaying blade descended, sending countless fiery blades toward the strange birds. Dozens of strange birds were instantly engulfed by the fiery blades. There were simply too many strange birds in the sky, and one fighter jet after another began to fall. The horde of 300,000 zombies stretched the battlefront, making it difficult for the defending forces on the outer wall to manage the situation. Countless laser cannons were destroyed, and many zombies had already climbed onto the outer city walls. Soon, the sound of cries echoed through the air. Yi Li smiled faintly as he remained in midair. These zombies were truly insane, but he would make them understand what true insanity was. But then, Yi Li lifted the dragon-slaying blade high and activated the second level of the ancient devil tome. The blade exuded a dense aura of demonic energy. Primordial Demon Slash. Yi Li's voice seemed to have lasted endless epochs, resonating through the sky. As the blade fell, 3,000 divine and demonic illusions rushed fiercely toward the zombies beneath the outer city wall. Chapter 184, Earth-Shattering Battle, Boom. The 3,000 divine and demonic illusions rushed toward the zombies beneath the outer city wall. In an instant, a deafening explosion rocked the area. The soldiers on the outer city wall were knocked to the ground, and countless zombies were sent flying. At this moment, the zombies below the outer city wall turned into nothingness, leaving a huge crater in their wake. Primordial Demon Slash, an S-level attack skill, enjoy. The Primordial Demon Slash tore a massive gap in the outer city wall. Yi Li then gave a command to the Apocalypse Legion. Attack! With the command given, Yi Li and the Apocalypse Legion leaped down to the area below the outer city wall. Yi Li stood in the center, with Ada and Hongya on his right side, and Bai Wawa and Yutong on his left side. They spaced themselves out with tens of meters between each member. Today, Yi Li led the Apocalypse Legion, with each member guarding a specific area. They were going to hold the line one by one, making it virtually impenetrable. Meanwhile, the massive horde of zombies and the dark race continued their assault. Upon seeing this situation, Elder Su hurriedly shouted, "All genetic warriors of Tier 4 or above, follow me down. The military will provide cover." Soon, a large group of genetic warriors arrived below the outer city wall. Seeing Elder Su and the others coming down, Yi Li pondered whether He should let Ada and the others deal with the zombies first, and then he would synthesize them. Without further ado, Yili gave Ada and the others a secret command. Except for the Apocalypse Legion and himself, he couldn't synthesize zombies that others knocked down. At this point, the Dark Race and the horde of zombies had already reached the area below the outer city wall. The Apocalypse Legion and the military of Huangjiang Base City engaged in a fierce battle against the Dark Race and the zombies. The scene was absolutely brutal. Yili opened the synthesis grid in his mind and began synthesizing zombies like mad. 1,000, 2,000. Yili's synthesized zombies increased in number rapidly, but he didn't order them to attack. Facing such a massive horde of zombies, these 2,000 zombies would be reduced to dust in no time. The laser cannons, laser guns, and machine guns on the outer city wall were firing relentlessly at the zombies, and fighter jets in the sky shot down numerous strange birds. Many aircraft were also destroyed by the strange birds. On top of a mountain, this mountain provided a clear view of the battlefield below. Two figures stood on the mountain top, or rather, one was a member of the Dark Race and the other was a human. They were leisurely watching this earth-shattering battle unfold. The member of the Dark Race had no physical form and appeared as a soul-like entity, dressed in a black robe. If he had a scythe in his hand, he would resemble a real Grim Reaper. The human beside him wore a simple Chinese tunic suit, his hands folded behind his back, and his expression was composed. The member of the Dark Race was undoubtedly the leader of the Dark Race in Pan City, a 7th-tier spirit soul. The human beside him was none other than the former head of the Warrior Alliance in Huangjiang Base City, Xiao Tian. Brother Xiao, did you see the power of the dragon-slaying blade? The 7th-tier spirit soul leader said with a sinister smile. Yes, I did. As long as we obtain the dragon-slaying blade and offer it to the Dark Temple, our future will be a bright one, Xiao Tian chuckled. Yili still hadn't taken action. In his mind, he continued to synthesize zombies frantically. At this moment, he had synthesized over 3,000 zombies. He knew he needed many more. The Dark Race and the immense horde of zombies were attacking the genetic warriors of Huangjiang Base City, and many genetic warriors had already turned into zombies. Seeing that Huangjiang Base City was struggling to hold on, Yili wielded the dragon-slaying blade and unleashed several terrifying slashes, accompanied by the roar of a dragon. Countless zombies were instantly killed. Then he began synthesizing zombies. Chapter 185, The Counterattack begins. Finally, Yili had synthesized 10,000 zombies, forming a significant force. At this point, the powerful Dark Race arrived beneath the outer city wall, as they had realized that the zombies couldn't breach the defenses. The genetic warriors of Huangjiang Base City were instantly hit with numerous casualties. Ah! The sounds of miserable screams echoed ceaselessly. Yili closed the synthesis grid in his mind, a cold glint flashing in his eyes. He raised the dragon-slaying blade, and demonic energy swirled around it. A flash of cold light, followed by a dragon-like slash. Yili unleashed 13 consecutive slashes. Each of these 13 slashes was incredibly terrifying. After these 13 slashes, all the Dark Race members in front of Yili vanished. Following this, Yili ordered over 10,000 zombies to counterattack. At this moment, the intense battle had lasted for a day and a night. Yili leaped into the air. The demonic energy of the second level of the primordial demon swirled around him as he held the dragon-slaying blade. He then executed another primordial demon slash. In an instant, countless shadowy figures filled the sky. The 3,000 divine and demonic illusions surged downward, each illusion akin to a nuclear warhead, bombarding the area below ferociously. Seeing this situation, Elder Su ordered hundreds of thousands of soldiers from Huangjiang Base City to leave the city and engage in a life-or-death struggle against the Dark Race and the zombies. In order to defeat them, they had to make the Dark Race afraid and let them know that the human world wouldn't tolerate their invasion. To capture the thief, capture the king first, was always a classic tactic. In midair, Yi Li activated the heavenly spirit eyes, exploring the most powerful dark race members. Soon, he found the strongest dark race member on a mountaintop not far away, a 7th-tier spirit soul. Beside the 7th-tier spirit soul, he also discovered a 7th-tier evolved being, and he could easily deduce that it was Xiao Tian. He noticed that the 7th-tier spirit soul and Xiao Tian were both watching the battlefield. Yi Li smiled. He also spotted a 6th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead and several other 6th-tier dark race members. During the time when he and the Apocalypse Legion were massacring the dark race members in Pan City, the 6th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead managed to escape. This time, he would use this 6th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead as a sacrifice for his blade before taking down the 7th-tier spirit soul. None of them could escape. Suddenly, Yi Li activated swift steps and instantly appeared before the 6th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead. The 6th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead was currently in discussion with several 6th-tier dark race members, contemplating whether or not to join the battle. He would never have dreamt that Yi Li would suddenly appear in front of him. In Pan City, Yi Li and the Apocalypse Legion had slaughtered over 1,000 dark race members. The 6th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead had narrowly escaped. He knew that Yi Li had the dragon-slaying blade and told it to his leader, the 7th-tier spirit soul. Upon hearing that the dragon-slaying blade had appeared, the 7th-tier spirit soul, the strongest dark race member in the jurisdiction of Huangjiang Base City, immediately rushed to Pan City. The 6th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead knew all too well how terrifying Yi Li was. He looked at Yi Li in shock. Yi Li, you. He simply couldn't fathom why Yi Li had suddenly appeared in front of him. Big brother, the dragon-slaying blade is in this brat's hands. Let's kill him quickly and take the dragon-slaying blade. A 6th-tier giant coldly sneered. The 6th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead thought that there were 5 dark race members on his side, all at the 6th tier, while Yi Li was alone. With this in mind, the 6th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead's fear subsided. Yi Li, hand over the dragon-slaying blade, and I can give you a swift death, the 6th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead said coldly. Chapter 186, Where do you think you can retreat to? Big brother, why waste time talking to him? Just snatch the dragon-slaying blade from him. As the words fell, the 6th-tier giant several yards tall lunged towards Yi Li. Yi Li sneered coldly. In his eyes, a 6th-tier dark race member was nothing but an ant. How dare a 6th-tier dark race member charge at him? Swish! Yi Li swung his blade, and the massive body of the 6th-tier giant was instantly cut in half at the waist. The 2 halves of its body fell to the ground, and green blood gushed out wildly. How was that possible? The 6th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead and the other 6th-tier dark race members widened their eyes. They couldn't believe that Yi Li had slain the 6th-tier giant with a single slash. Don't be afraid, you will end up the same way, Yi Li said calmly. The 6th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead was horrified upon hearing this. He knew that Yi Li wasn't making empty promises. He no longer wanted to seize the dragon-slaying blade from Yi Li's hands. All he wanted was to escape. However, he couldn't escape from the palm of Yi Li's hand. As the 6th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead fled frantically, Yi Li calmly said, Flame blade technique. As the words left his mouth, countless blades of fire were unleashed from the dragon-slaying blade towards them. The 6th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead and several other 6th-tier dark race members faced only one fate, becoming souls under the blade of the dragon-slaying blade. They didn't even have a chance to let out a scream before being consumed by the flames. By now, all the attacking 6th-tier dark race members had been annihilated. Most of the remaining dark race members were between the 2nd and 4th tiers. They were no match for the warriors of Huangjiang Base City. The genetic warriors of Huangjiang Base City and the hundreds of thousands of soldiers had driven the dark race members into retreat. They were now fueled by their boiling blood, having forgotten the concept of death. All they knew was that they had to kill the dark race members and zombies. This was because they had never felt so exhilarated in their lives. Yili activated the heavenly spirit eyes, noticing that the 7th-tier spirit soul and Xiao Tian, standing atop the mountain, were both astonished. No matter how they imagined the situation, the 7th-tier spirit soul and Xiao Tian could never have expected this outcome. They had assumed that they wouldn't need to make a move to breach Huangjiang base city's defenses. They believed that they would easily obtain the dragon-slaying blade when the time came. Unfortunately, they had overlooked one thing. That was Yili and his Apocalypse Legion. "Sir, what should we do now?" Xiao Tian looked at the 7th-tier spirit soul. The situation was clear at this point. The dark race members and zombies were in full retreat. The 7th-tier spirit soul clenched his teeth and showed a trace of reluctance on his face. After a few seconds, he finally spoke, "Retreat." However, just as the 7th-tier spirit soul and Xiao Tian were about to start moving, they heard an extremely domineering voice. "Retreat? Where do you think you can retreat to?" The 7th-tier spirit soul and Xiao Tian were startled and quickly followed the direction of the voice. They saw a young man with a jade-like countenance approaching on the wind. The young man held a blade that gleamed with a cold light. The blade's body was engraved with the image of a 5-clawed blood dragon. What kind of blade other than the dragon-slaying blade would this be? Who else could this person be but Yili? The 7th-tier spirit soul and Xiao Tian were utterly astounded. Given their realms, they should have detected Yili's presence. Yet, Yili had suddenly appeared before them. How could they not be shocked? However, the 7th-tier spirit soul didn't choose to look at Yili. Instead, his gaze fixated on the dragon-slaying blade in Yili's hand. The dragon-slaying blade. One will search high and low only to find it when one least expects it. The 7th-tier spirit soul sneered coldly. Xiao Tian looked behind Yili and realized that Yili didn't have any backup. A smile appeared on his silver basin-like face. Chapter 187, Fighting 2 Alone, Why Are You Laughing? Yili was a bit puzzled. As soon as he said this, the 7th-tier spirit soul and Xiao Tian laughed even harder. "We're laughing because you don't even realize that death is looming over you." Xiao Tian sneered at Yili. "Human, if I'm not mistaken, you should be a 7th-tier evolved being, right? 7th-tier evolved beings are indeed strong, but it's a pity. We are all at the 7th tier as well. Why do you think we're laughing?" The 7th-tier spirit soul giggled. "Hee hee." Yili shook his head. Why did people always think they could kill him? Apart from being a 7th-tier evolved being, he was also an SSS-level genetic warrior. With the dragon-slaying blade and the 2nd level of the ancient devil tome, fighting 2 7th-tier evolved beings wasn't much of a challenge in his eyes. "Enough, human. Hand over the dragon-slaying blade, and I might consider giving you a painless death," the 7th-tier spirit soul said with an outstretched hand. Yili pondered for a moment, then spoke. "A 6th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead said the exact same thing to me just now. Do you know what happened to him?" Upon hearing this, the 7th-tier spirit soul and Xiao Tian's expressions turned cold. "Brat, I see you won't cry until you see your coffin." Xiao Tian shouted coldly. Yili smiled faintly. "Unfortunately, even if one see the coffin, one won't shed a tear, because I will never need a coffin." The 7th-tier spirit soul and Xiao Tian were enraged by Yili's words. They stared intently at him. "Human, do you think I'm as useless as that 6th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead?" The 7th-tier spirit soul's anger resonated in his voice. With a swish, the 7th-tier spirit soul extended a hand that resembled a soul. It then expanded to several meters in size and lunged at Yili. However, Yili remained unmoved, as if he hadn't noticed a soul-like hand reaching out to grasp him. Yet, just as the soul-like hand was about to seize Yili, 2 beams of golden light suddenly shot out from his eyes. These terrifying beams of golden light struck the soul-like hand, causing it to vanish in an instant. "What?" The 7th tier spirit soul and Xiao Tian were both shocked. It wasn't that Yi Li's attack was exceptionally powerful, they had simply never seen this kind of attack method before. Just stand in one place and shoot out 2 beams of golden light? Was it really that simple? I didn't expect you to be an SSS-level genetic warrior. Xiao Tian stared at Yi Li and said in a deep voice. The golden light that Yi Li had used was a color unique to SSS-level genetic warriors. Xiao Tian, having come from the Warrior Alliance headquarters, had decent knowledge. However, even if you are an SSS-level genetic warrior, you still have no chance against 2 7th-tier evolved beings. Xiao Tian continued to shout. Yi Li found this somewhat dull. He had no idea where Xiao Tian's courage came from to say such things. In that case, wouldn't it be a sin if he, Yi Li, didn't reveal his strength? Come over here, Yi Li beckoned to the 7th-tier spirit soul and Xiao Tian with a crooked finger. Upon seeing this, the 7th-tier spirit soul and Xiao Tian were driven into a frenzy. As 7th-tier powerhouses, when had anyone dared to provoke them with such a gesture? Suddenly, the 7th-tier spirit soul and Xiao Tian rushed toward Yi Li. Yi Li sneered coldly. He intended to show these 2 7th-tier evolved beings what true fear was. With a flash of determination, he activated the 2nd level of the ancient devil tome. The dragon-slaying blade instantly became entwined with a devilish aura. Chapter 188, This is what you get for provoking me, Flame Blade Technique. The dragon-slaying blade descended, unleashing countless flames that burst forth from its edge. Both the 7th-tier spirit soul and Xiao Tian were in the 7th tier, so dodging the flaming blade technique wasn't too difficult for them. After evading the flame blade technique, Xiao Tian threw a heavy punch, and purple fist shadows came rushing towards Yi Li. In an instant, the mountaintop was filled with ghostly shadows, exuding cold light, spiritual energy, and sinister aura. Yi Li faced the 2 of them alone and fought for over 20 rounds. After all, the higher the level, the wider the gap. There was an insurmountable chasm between the 6th tier and the 7th tier. Even if Yi Li possessed countless techniques and abilities, it was still impossible for him to instantly kill 2 7th-tier evolved beings. The 7th-tier spirit soul and Xiao Tian grew more and more anxious. They couldn't have anticipated that Yi Li would be so formidable. After all, they were both 7th-tier powerhouses. Swish! 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 Yi Li swung his blade again, unleashing 13 strikes. These 13 strikes were as formidable as the famous 13 sword strikes of martial art novels, each one releasing an astounding power. The 7th-tier spirit soul and Xiao Tian were taken aback, and they quickly dodged, using almost all of their strength. Finally, they managed to evade the 13 strikes. However, just as they were catching their breath, they realized that Yi Li wasn't finished yet. They saw Yi Li raise the dragon-slaying blade high and activate the 2nd level of the ancient devil tome. Terrifying devilish energy entwined around the blade. Before the blade had even descended, the devilish energy began to suppress the 7th-tier spirit soul and Xiao Tian. What's with this pressure? The 7th-tier spirit soul and Xiao Tian were both horrified. They were both at the 7th tier, so why was Yi Li able to suppress them? They didn't understand. They truly couldn't comprehend it. But they would never have the chance to figure it out. This was because Yi Li's dragon-slaying blade had already fallen. In the moment the blade descended, Yi Li enunciated a few words, primordial demon slash. As the words fell, the blade fell. 3,000 godly and demonic phantoms burst forth, creating an earth-shattering explosion on the relatively small mountaintop. Yi Li smiled faintly. This was what they got for provoking him, Yi Li, ding. Congratulations to the host for killing 2 7th-tier enemies. You have gained a chance to draw a random reward. Will the host use it? The system's voice echoed in Yi Li's mind. Yi Li chuckled. Another chance for a lucky draw. Yes. Immediately, a virtual roulette wheel appeared in his mind and began to spin. Congratulations to the host for gaining the chance to upgrade all skills. Will the host use it? A delighted expression appeared on Yuli's face upon hearing this. The chance to upgrade all skills was simply too incredible. Yes. Upgrade of all skills initiated IO%, 30%, 60%, IOO%. Upgrade of all skills completed. Yili checked his skills, Healing Art, max level. Flaming Blade Technique, S grade. Ancient Devil Tome, 3rd level. Primordial Demon Slash, SS grade. After upgrading all his skills, Yili felt that his overall strength had increased several times over. Although he hadn't reached the 8th tier evolved being yet, if all his skills had been upgraded just now, killing 7th tier spirit souls and Xiao Tian would have been as easy as slaughtering pigs and dogs. Oh right, the zombies. Only now did Yili remember that there were still many zombies left to synthesize. He quickly activated the swift steps and arrived at the battlefield below. At this moment, many of the dark creatures and zombie groups had already escaped, leaving behind the zombies synthesized by Yili and those that had lost their combat capabilities. Chapter 189, End of the Great Battle. After synthesizing 10,000 zombies, Yili didn't continue synthesizing more. He ordered the remaining nearly 4,000 zombies to attack the massive horde of zombies. Currently, less than 4,000 zombies remained from the initial 10,000. For the current Yili, this number seemed pitiful. Fortunately, there were still many zombies on the ground that hadn't died yet. Yili could determine which zombies had been defeated by his Apocalypse Legion. After opening the synthesis grid in his mind, Yili synthesized the zombies that the Apocalypse Legion had defeated. In the end, he synthesized a total of over 8,000 zombies with a roughly equal number of males and females. After synthesizing these 8,000 zombies, he synthesized a Tier 4 male zombie and a Tier 4 female zombie. In his system space, he already had a Tier 4 male zombie and a Tier 4 female zombie, so he continued the synthesis. Immediately after, Yili created a Tier 5 male zombie and a Tier 5 female zombie. He had already informed the leaders of the Huangjiang base city that his terrifying ability could make zombies attack other zombies. After placing the Tier 5 male and female zombies into the system space, Elder Su led the warriors of Huangjiang base city over. Their faces bore joyful smiles because they had won the battle, a complete victory. Mr. Yi. Elder Su took the lead, addressing Yili with respect. Soon, all the leaders of Huangjiang base city followed suit, addressing Yili respectfully. If it weren't for Yili, Huangjiang base city would have likely fallen by now. Yili's actions were akin to holding up a collapsing building and reversing a doomed situation. Mr. Yi, you are Huangjiang base city's great benefactor. Elder Su looked at Yili and said. Yili's face remained unchanged, his eyes calm as he gazed at Elder Su. It's nothing. I just did it by the way. The leaders of Huangjiang base city were surprised to hear this. It seemed that Mr. Yi was indeed a remarkable individual. Humph. At this moment, Su Yao snorted coldly. It's a pity we didn't encounter the 7th tier spirit soul and Xiao Tian. Otherwise, we would have extinguished their souls and wiped them out. Yeah, I wonder where they've fled to. It won't be easy to find them now, said Lu Xinghe, the head of the Lu family. Elder Su's expression also grew grave. If the 7th tier spirit soul and Xiao Tian weren't dead, who knew if they would mobilize the zombies again to attack Huangjiang base city? The 7th tier spirit soul and Xiao Tian you mentioned have already been killed by me, Yili said slowly. His words surprised everyone in Huangjiang base city. They couldn't believe what Yili said. Mr. Yi, are you telling the truth? Elder Su hurriedly asked. Yili smiled faintly. I never tell lies. Hearing this, everyone in Huangjiang base city let out a sigh of relief. If the 7th tier spirit soul and Xiao Tian were truly dead, then Huangjiang base city could enjoy a period of peace. Mr. Yi, let's return to the city, Elder Su said respectfully to Yi Li. Yi Li nodded, and then everyone followed him back to the main city of Huangjiang Bay City. After reaching Su's residence, Elder Su quickly invited Yi Li to take a seat. After Yi Li sat down, Elder Su looked at him and said, Mr. Yi, one wonder what your plans are for the future. If possible, Elder Su naturally hoped that Yi Li would stay in Huangjiang Bay City. After all, Yi Li was incredibly powerful and could become a pillar of support for Huangjiang Bay City.
Chapter 190, Wasteland Zone. People go higher, water flows lower. Yi Li had always considered this saying a classic, and he naturally understood what Elder Su meant. Of course, he wouldn't choose to stay in Huangjiang Bay City. After all, in the context of the entire post-apocalyptic continent, Huangjiang Bay City was quite small. Yi Li remained silent, allowing Elder Su to interpret his intentions. Seeing Yi Li's silence, Elder Su felt a slight disappointment, but he quickly accepted it. He knew that someone like Yi Li would never stay in such a small place as Huangjiang Bay City. Mr. Yi, outside of Huangjiang Bay City, there is a wilderness area known as the Wasteland Zone. In this zone, there are countless animals infected by the zombie virus, numerous zombies, squads hunting zombies, and wilderness warriors, all of whom enjoy exploring the Wasteland Zone. Elder Su looked at Yi Li cautiously, unsure if recommending this place would make him happy. Yi Li found the idea interesting and thought it was worth a visit. Yi Li stayed in Huangjiang Bay City for 3 more days. The 3 major families were urging the people to repair the outer city to prevent further zombie attacks. After 3 days, Yi Li bid farewell to Elder Su and left Huangjiang Bay City. During these days, Yi Li had also gathered information about the Wasteland Zone. It was an expansive and boundless area. Some parts of it were extremely dangerous and were referred to as the forbidden zones of life. In the Wasteland Zone, in addition to dark race, zombies, and animals infected with the zombie virus, there were also many human organizations. Yi Li activated the swift steps and headed towards the Wasteland Zone. The distance between the wasteland and Huangjiang Bay City was quite far. After a full day and night of travel using swift steps, he finally arrived at the Wasteland Zone. It was important to note that Yi Li had been using swift steps along the way. With its ability to cover 10,000 miles during the day and 8,000 miles at night, one could imagine how far he had traveled in a day and a night. Upon arriving at the Wasteland Zone, Yi Li was greeted by a vast plain. It was currently noon, and there were many animals infected by the zombie virus tearing each other apart on the plain. Several scattered zombies, perhaps having gotten lost or for some other reason, were mercilessly devoured by these infected animals. Yi Li thought that only by living in this Wasteland Zone one could constantly feel danger, unlike the civilians in the base cities who had no idea how precious life was. Boo-hoo! Big brother, don't die, don't die. Suddenly, a very young crying voice reached Yi Li's ears. Yi Li turned his gaze to the source of the sound and saw a 5 or 6-year-old girl crying loudly.
Beneath the girl lay a man in his 20s. The man wore long robes, his hair cascading down. Blood kept flowing from his mouth. Around the girl were a dozen or so men. Most of them were second-tier evolved beings, with only 1 third-tier evolved being among them. Ha ha ha, Ah Chi, I asked you to submit to me, but you refused. Now you know the consequences of offending me, don't you? A man with a gruesome scar on his face laughed triumphantly. This man seemed to be the leader of the group of second-tier evolved beings, and he was a third-tier evolved being. Humph, you could have escaped by yourself, but you dared to take Miss Luoli with you. You won't escape death now. The man continued speaking. The injured young man under the girl's body stared at the speaking man and said firmly, even if I die, I won't let you touch Miss Luoli. Upon hearing this, the man burst into laughter. Ah Chi, if you're about to die in the next second, how will you protect Miss Luoli? Chapter 191, The One Who Will Kill You. Yi Li observed this scene with a detached gaze. He hadn't expected to encounter such a situation in the wasteland zone. Upon hearing the conversation, the young girl quickly shielded the injured youth and stared at the third-tier evolved being who led the group. Do not harm Ah-Chi, big brother. Although the girl looked to be only around 5 or 6 years old, she was already a level 5 awakened being. Her talent was truly terrifying. The leader of the group sneered, Miss Luoli, do you think you're still the Miss of Flame? Now Flame's leader is Mr. Han. You. Upon hearing what he said, the girl named Luoli seemed a bit disoriented. Miss Luoli, Mr. Han has always had feelings for your sister. If it weren't for your sister pleading with Mr. Han to spare you, do you think you would still be standing here talking to me? The man continued. Ah-Chi struggled to stand up from the ground. A horrifying blood hole was visible on his body, and he held a gleaming cold sword in his hand. I said, you're not allowed to touch Miss Luoli. Ah-Chi stared at the man, his eyes turning red. Swish. Suddenly, the leader of the group thrust a knife into Ah-Chi's body. Brother Al-Chi, no. Luoli cried out, tears streaming down her face. As Yili watched this scene, an idea suddenly struck him. The 4 zombies in the Apocalypse Legion were all 7th-tier zombies. It was time to train a new one. Ah-Chi used a sword. Could he be trained into a swordsman? Swordsman Ah-Chi. The name alone sounded incredibly imposing. With this thought in mind, a look of excitement appeared on Yili's face. Yes, he could indeed use his healing ability to save Ah-Chi. However, he never considered himself a good person. He only did what he wanted to do. What reason did he need for his actions? Without delay, Yili activated swift steps and hurried toward Ah-Chi. Ah-Chi's life force was rapidly draining. If he didn't reach him soon, Ah-Chi would die. If Ah-Chi died, how could Yili train him? The speed of swift steps was incredibly fast. In just an instant, Yili arrived by Ah-Chi's side. He used his heavenly spirit eyes to check on Ah-Chi and found that he still had some time before his life completely faded away. During this time, Yili would eliminate all these dozen or so genetic warriors. As Yili appeared by Al-Chi and Luo Li's side, the leader and the other genetic warriors took 3 steps back in shock. They would never have dreamed that a person would suddenly appear. Who are you? After steadying himself, the leader of the group stared at Yili and asked coldly. The one who will kill you, Yili said slowly, his expression calm like water. Upon hearing these words, the leader's expression grew solemn. He knew that someone with such terrifying speed couldn't be an ordinary person. Brother, we are from Flame. You should know what kind of organization Flame is. The leader hoped to use their affiliation with Flame to make Yili reconsider, but unfortunately, his plan not only backfired but also failed miserably. Yili shook his head slowly. I don't know what kind of organization Flame is, but I do know that you will die soon. With these words, all the genetic warriors widened their eyes. They had realized that the young man in front of them was incredibly dangerous. This young man's eyes were filled with killing intent, and he was full of a domineering aura. Chapter 192, Swordsman Ah-Chi Flame is. The leader's words were cut short before he even had a chance to continue, as his body was penetrated by the heavenly spirit eyes. Although the attack power of the heavenly vision wasn't particularly great, the same applied to one young finger. However, for these low-level evolved beings, the heavenly spirit eyes was an S-class attack skill. The leader fell heavily to the ground, his eyes wide open with disbelief, as if he couldn't believe that he had died just like that. The other dozen or so genetic warriors were terrified by this scene. A 3rd-tier evolved being was killed instantly, so what chance did they, as 2nd-tier evolved beings, have? They wanted to escape, truly wanted to escape. However, no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't escape their fate. Death was the only thing waiting for them. Ah! Suddenly, a series of agonized screams rang out. Yi Li's expression remained as calm as water. It was as if nothing had happened. He slowly turned around to look at the young girl and the injured youth. Luo Li's little face was filled with fear. She couldn't tell if Yi Li was a good person or a bad person. Thank you, Senior, for saving us, Ah Chi said in a trembling voice. Ah Chi's face had turned as pale as paper. The pain had caused him to break out in a cold sweat. A faint smile appeared on Yi Li's face. This person before him would soon become the zombie he would cultivate. Follow me and become a member of the Apocalypse Legion, Yi Li said to Ah Chi. Ah Chi had no idea what Yi Li meant. He had never even heard of the Apocalypse Legion. I apologize. One don't understand Senior's meaning, Ah Chi weakly replied. Blood continued to flow from his wound, and he didn't have much time left before he would bleed to death. Yi Li was a very democratic person. He generally wouldn't force others, but instead allowed them to choose willingly. He looked at Ah Chi and said, if you die, what will happen to her? The her he referred to was naturally Luo Li. Ah Chi's lips curled slightly, and a bitter smile appeared on his face. Senior, if possible, could you take Miss Luo Li away? Ah Chi's eyes were filled with pleading. His face was becoming even paler, and he was losing blood rapidly. Brother Al Chi. Luo Li's little face was covered in tears. Al Chi was her adoptive brother and not affiliated with Flame. Yi Li looked at Al Chi. He knew that Ah Chi's time was running out. Follow me, and I will grant your request. Although Al Chi couldn't understand what Yi Li meant, he had no other options left. Meeting a human was already a stroke of luck. Why would he refuse? Senior, I agree, Ah Chi said weakly. Yi Li didn't say much. Instead, he released the Apocalypse Legion from his system space and instructed Alda to bite Al Chi. Alda bit down on Al Chi's arm. The speed at which the 7th-tier zombie's corpse poison spread was truly terrifying. In an instant, Ah Chi became a zombie. From now on, you shall be known as Swordsman Al Chi. Yi Li slowly spoke. Then he checked Swordsman Al Chi's attributes. Ah Chi, 1st-tier zombie. Zombie ability, none. Zombie attribute, speed. Yi Li was pleased. The most important attribute for a swordsman was speed. He hadn't expected Swordsman Ah Chi's attribute to be speed. He was really lucky. Chapter 193, Senior, can you save my sister? Luo Li stared blankly at Swordsman Al Chi. Why did it seem like her brother Ah Chi had been resurrected with full health? However, Ah Chi seemed a bit different now. Why did his eyes turn green? And why did Ah Chi look uglier? His face. Suddenly, Luo Li realized something, and her eyes widened. Immediately, she burst into tears and pointed at Yi Li. You turned brother Al Chi into a zombie. Yi Li didn't pay attention to Luo Li. He continued to look at Swordsman Ah Chi. No matter how he looked at him, he felt that Al Chi was perfect, though his current level was still too low. However, Yi Li wasn't worried at all. It was just too simple for him to cultivate a zombie right now. Yi Li had envisioned a scene where the number of zombies in his Apocalypse Legion continued to increase, and they would dominate the world together. That scene must be splendid. Ding! Congratulations to the host for cultivating a new zombie. You have obtained a super treasure chest. Would you like to open it? Open, Yi Li replied without hesitation. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the zombie-exclusive weapon, the Cleave Sword. Yi Li was taken aback. He quickly opened his inventory to examine the Cleave Sword. Cleave Sword, S-class weapon. Equipping a zombie with this sword increases their sword intent by tenfold. A powerful swordsman not only had a sword in their hand but also in their heart, not to mention their momentum. The momentum of a swordsman was naturally sword intent. Yi Li instructed swordsman Ah Chi to discard the long sword he held and equipped him with the cleave sword. The cleave sword was a pitch-black sword as dark as ink. It was sharp enough to cut hair and break through metal, looking extremely intimidating. Yi Li's next step was to upgrade swordsman Ah Chi's level. "Are you a member of the dark race?" At this moment, Luo Li's voice sounded in Yi Li's ears again. Yi Li turned around to look at Luo Li. "You're just a little fifth-tier evolved being. How could you understand how vast and boundless the heavens and earth are?" J11 Luo Li seemed a bit frightened. She stared at Yi Li with shock but didn't know what to say. "Let's go," Yi Li said slowly. Luo Li watched Yi Li's departing figure. After a few seconds, she mustered up the courage to say, "Senior, can you avenge my father? The bad people killed my father, and my sister was captured." Yi Li halted in his steps. He recalled what the leader had said earlier about how her sister begged someone named Han to spare Luo Li's life. Looking at the cultivator's strength just now, Yi Li had a rough idea of what kind of organization Flame was. It was probably a weak organization, as insignificant as ants. Now that Yi Li had gained swordsman Ah Chi, he was in a good mood. He turned around slowly to look at Luo Li. Luo Li was only 5 or 6 years old. It was indeed pitiful that she had experienced such an event. But in this apocalypse, how many people were truly free from misery? "Lead the way," Yi Li said casually to Luo Li. Luo Li was startled by his words. Her father and sister had both told her that the dark race was evil, and the zombie virus had been created by the dark race. She thought that Yi Li was powerful and didn't seem to harbor ill intentions toward her, so she dared to speak her mind. However, Luo Li never expected that Yi Li would actually agree. She looked at Yi Li's calm face, wondering if the dark race could also have good people. Roar! At that moment, dozens of roars reached Luo Li's ears. Dozens of infected wolves, affected by the zombie virus, were already approaching them. Chapter 194, Lead the Way. These dozens of evil wolves had all been infected by the zombie virus. Their eyes emitted eerie green light, and their sharp fangs gleamed coldly. They looked extremely terrifying. At this moment, dozens of evil wolves had surrounded Yi Li and Luo Li. Yi Li smiled. These wolves seemed to be at the 6th level, yet they dared to appear beside him, completely fearless due to their ignorance. Luo Li's small face was filled with fear. She was only 5 or 6 years old and had never experienced any battles. Roar! Suddenly, these dozens of evil wolves lunged at Yi Li and Luo Li. "Ali!" Luo Li screamed in fright and quickly closed her eyes. There was no need for Yi Li to take action. These 6th-level evil wolves were too weak, even more insignificant than ants, more like dust. Da punched, and Bai Wawa kicked. In an instant, the dozens of evil wolves disappeared without a trace, not even leaving behind their corpses. Luo Li heard the commotion and carefully opened her eyes. She found that dozens of evil wolves had disappeared. Iler's little face was filled with astonishment, but she didn't dare to ask, fearing that she might displease Yi Li. "Are you puzzled?" Yi Li looked at Luo Li calmly. Luo Li hadn't finished speaking before Yi Li interrupted her. "Don't ever feel puzzled. Every action one take will leave you puzzled for 3 days and 3 nights, Yi Li said slowly. Luo Li stared at Yi Li's serene face and suddenly felt that he wasn't a member of the dark race but a god of war from the heavens. Even though she was only 6 years old, she was already captivated by Yi Li. "Don't you want to avenge your father and save your sister?" Yi Li looked at Luo Li calmly. Luo Li snapped back to her senses upon hearing his words. She looked at Yi Li in shock. Yes. Then why don't you lead the way?" Yi Li said slowly. "Sure, senior," Luo Li quickly agreed. Soon, Yi Li led Luo Li in a certain direction. Wasteland area, a certain castle. The castle wasn't large, and its appearance was rather ugly. Inside the hall, a middle-aged man sat on a throne, leisurely playing with his fingers. Luo Yu, your younger sister should be arriving soon, the middle-aged man said casually. In front of the middle-aged man stood a woman who appeared to be in her 20s. She wore casual gray attire, had waist-length hair, and a face as delicate as jade. This woman was Luo Li's older sister, Luo Yu. She coldly stared at the middle-aged man on the throne. She must kill this man. This middle-aged man had killed her father. Originally, her father had been the leader of Flame. However, this ambitious individual before her killed her father and seized the position of Flame's leader. The middle-aged man's name was Han Hai, the leader of Flame Organization, a fifth-tier evolved being. This not-so-large castle was the headquarters of the Flame Organization. Seeing that Luo Yu remained silent, Han Hai smiled lightly. Why do you put yourself through this? Your father was already old. Still, he insisted on passing down the position of Flame's leader to you. Yet, you're only a second-tier evolved being. How could you bear such a heavy responsibility? I explained my reasons to your father. However, he thought one intended to take the position of Flame's leader and wanted to kill me. I had no choice but to fight back. Upon hearing this, Luo Yu's already cold face became even colder. She knew she couldn't show anger right now. Her sister, Luo Li, was still in their hands. She could only keep her gaze fixed on Han Hai. Chapter 195, Flame Base, Senior. The flame base is up ahead, Luo Li pointed to a location with her finger. Following the direction Luo Li pointed, Yi Li noticed a castle not far away. It was called a castle, but it was significantly inferior to a real castle. Let's go, Yi Li said slowly. Luo Li was taken aback. Although she knew Yi Li was powerful, walking over like this meant they would be facing the entire Flame Organization. She calculated that with Yi Li, there were only 7 of them. In contrast, the Flame Organization had several hundred members, all of them genetic warriors. As the saying goes, 2 fists are no match for 4 hands, and even a brave individual cannot withstand a group of wolves. Considering the vast difference in numbers, Luo Li thought that even if Yi Li was a member of the dark race, he wouldn't stand a chance. So, why was he walking straight over? Senior, the strongest person inside Flame right now is named Han Lai, a 5th-tier evolved being. Luo Li thought it necessary to remind Yi Li. Luo Li had rarely ventured out of the Flame base before and didn't know that Ada and the others were 7th-tier zombies. Upon hearing this, Yi Li inwardly shook his head. Indeed, it was such a pitifully small organization. A 5th-tier evolved being was truly too weak. Yi Li thought that it was a good thing Luo Li reminded him. He had to put swordsman Achi into the system space, otherwise, accidents might happen. After all, swordsman Achi was only a S-tier evolved being now. Soon, Yi Li put swordsman Achi into the system space. Luo Li was surprised. She clearly remembered that brother Al Chi was just beside her a moment ago. Lo, did he suddenly disappear? Senior, where's brother Ah Chi? Luo Li quickly asked. Yi Li thought this girl really had a lot of questions. Don't ask so much. Let's go, he said. Then Yi Li slowly walked toward the castle. Luo Li quickly followed. You should know that I've always liked you. I had no choice but to kill your father. Why do you ignore me? Han Lai looked at Luo Yu. Luo Yu tightly clenched her fist, and her fingernails pierced her skin without her feeling any pain. She knew that she had to endure for now. By the way, once Liar comes back, let's get married. After all, I've always liked you, and you've always liked me. Han Wenlei's face was smug as he smiled. Luo Yu suddenly felt a bit lost. She was only a 2nd-tier evolved being now, while Han Lai was a 5th-tier evolved being. The gap between them was like night and day. Could she really take revenge? But, as they say, a debt of blood must be paid in blood. Luo Yu knew she had to kill Han Hai, no matter what price she had to pay. Yi Li led the Apocalypse Legion and Luo Li to the entrance of the flame base. There were more than 10 Istir evolved beings guarding the entrance, all dressed in red robes with red scarves on their heads. "Miss Luo Li, you've returned," a Istir evolved being said to Luo Li. Yes, Luo Li said with some fear. This Istir evolved being was then taken aback. Wasn't Luo Li supposed to have been captured and brought back? And the people who went to capture her, why hadn't any of them returned? And there were several unfamiliar faces. When this Istir evolved being looked at the Apocalypse Legion beside Yi Li, he couldn't even continue his thoughts. The eyes of these 4 zombies were red. Red-eyed zombies. 7th tier zombies. At this point, the Istir evolved being took a few steps back. His eyes widened as he yelled, "7th tier zombies. For 7th tier zombies." Chapter 196, Fear. The other dozen or so men were all Istir evolved beings. How could they not recognize the levels of the 4 zombies beside Yi Li? 7th tier zombies, these were 7th tier zombies. These dozen Istir evolved beings were so scared that their souls seemed to leave their bodies. Their entire bodies were trembling violently. They wanted to run inside, but they found that their bodies had no strength left. "Leave one alive, and kill the rest," Yi Li told Alda. After receiving Yi Li's order, Alda swung his fist forcefully. Boom! After a loud noise, these dozen or so Istir evolved beings instantly died in misery. Just as Yi Li ordered, one Istir evolved being was indeed left alive. Luo Li was dumbfounded. She had heard about the levels of mutated zombies. Zombies of level 1 to 10 were ordinary zombies. Those above level 10 were mutated zombies. Mutated zombies included Istir and 2nd tier ones. If these were 7th tier zombies, then wouldn't that mean? And there were 4 7th tier zombies. By now, Luo Li finally understood why Senior chose to infiltrate the flame base with such a small group. Luo Li had heard of mutated zombies before, but she didn't know how to distinguish them. If she had known that the eyes of 7th tier mutated zombies were red, she wouldn't have had her previous thoughts. The one Istir evolved being who survived was worse off than if he had died. He had reached a level of fear he had never experienced before. He was lying limp on the ground, as if all his strength had been drained away. Forget strength, even his soul seemed to have been extracted from his body. If there were a competition for the most frightened person, he would undoubtedly take first place. Scared to the point of wetting oneself? It was nothing, he had already wet himself long ago. This Istir evolved being just hated that he couldn't pee more. At least it would warm up his thighs. "Are you scared?" Yi Li looked at the Istir evolved being calmly. This Istir evolved being didn't just fear, he was terrified. His soul was shaken to the core, and he was horrified beyond measure. This Istir evolved being couldn't even utter a complete sentence. His teeth were chattering uncontrollably. He didn't want to die. He really didn't want to die. "Go in and report. Tell them Yi Li has arrived," Yi Li said slowly. The Istir evolved being had thought that he was going to die soon. However, he could never have anticipated that he would be given a new lease on life. He felt as if he had been reborn and quickly scrambled inside. In fact, Yi Li could have charged in and unleashed a massacre, but he chose not to. Sometimes, instilling extreme fear in someone and then killing them afterward felt more satisfying. "You guys stay here and protect her," Yi Li said before activating the swift steps, disappearing from his original spot. Flame base, the main hall. Sitting on the throne, Han Hai was puzzled. He wondered why those useless people hadn't brought Luo Li back yet. As long as they brought Luo Li back, he could marry Luo Yu. Of course, possessing Luo Yu was his ultimate goal. Leader. Leader! Suddenly, a panicked shout echoed through the hall. Following this S-tier evolved being, Yili hid on a beam above them. He was a 7th tier evolved being. They wouldn't be able to detect him no matter what. Han Hai was taken aback, wondering if something unexpected happened when those useless people were capturing Ah Chi and Luo Li. Chapter 197, Chief, the sky is falling. Han Hai furrowed his brows and glared fiercely at the first-tier evolved being. Why panic? The sky hasn't fallen yet. The S-tier evolved being's hair was disheveled, his whole body dirty, and his pants were wet. Chief, the sky has fallen, the S-tier evolved being said fearfully. Once this statement came out, not just Han Hai, everyone in the hall was left stunned. The sky had fallen. Why hadn't they felt a thing? Speak up. What exactly is happening? Han Hai demanded. From his vantage point on the beam, Yili observed Han Hai on the throne. The woman on Han Hai's right should be Luo Li's sister. He wondered if he should launch a sneak attack on Han Hai. After a moment's thought, he dismissed the idea as uninteresting. Chief, a powerful dark race member has arrived outside. He's accompanied by 4 7th-tier zombies, and Miss Luo Li is also with him, the S-tier evolved being said fearfully. What? When the people in the hall heard this, their eyes widened in shock. A powerful dark race member? 4 7th-tier zombies? Such a level of power had never been heard of before, not to mention seen. What did you say? Han Hai stared fixedly at the S-tier evolved being. A strong sense of disbelief filled Luo Yu's cold face. She couldn't fathom why Liar would be with a powerful dark race member. Chief, I assure you, what one said is true. We need to escape for our lives. Those are 4 7th-tier zombies, the S-tier evolved being said, his face pale and tearful. Everyone from the Flame organization in the hall was filled with terror. If what the man said was true, there was no way they could withstand 4 7th-tier zombies. Escape your damn mother! Han Hai roared angrily. Were you bribed by Luo Yu? Are you intentionally saying this? As soon as these words were spoken, everyone looked at each other, thinking that what Han Hai said made sense. They had never even seen a 7th-tier zombie, let alone 4 at once. The S-tier evolved being was on the verge of tears. He couldn't understand why the chief didn't believe him. There was no time left, they had to escape immediately. Han Hai sneered coldly, his gaze fixed on Luo Yu. Luo Yu, one didn't expect you to resort to schemes. Luo Yu hadn't bribed the S-tier evolved being, she had initially thought his words were a lie. But now, it seemed. If you want to play games with me, I'll play with you to the end, Han Hai said coldly. Yili had reached his limit watching this. These people actually doubted the situation. It was truly maddening. Has the Flame organization always been so keen on wrongly accusing others? Suddenly, a carefree voice echoed through the hall. Han Hai and everyone in the hall were immediately shocked. They frantically searched for the source of the voice, but no matter how they looked, they couldn't find anyone speaking. Don't bother searching, I'm right in front of you, aren't one? The voice entered their ears again. Everyone was pale and horrified as they looked around. When they didn't look, everything was normal. But once they looked, they were all petrified. A moment ago, there was clearly no one in the hall, so why was there now a handsome young man? The youth looked calm and composed as he gazed at Luo Yu. Are you Luo Li's sister? Yi Li said slowly. Who are you? Luo Yu was taken aback. Everyone looked at Yi Li, wondering if this person was the powerful dark race member the S-tier evolved being spoke of. With this thought, everyone was shocked once again. Chapter 198, Believe it or not, you're about to die, it doesn't matter who I am. What matters is whether you're Luo Li's sister, Yi Li said calmly, looking at Luo Yu. Luo Yu was startled. She felt a mysterious power emanating from Yi Li that compelled her to respond. I am her sister, Luo Yu answered. Yi Li didn't continue speaking. At that moment, he heard a chilling laughter. The source of the sinister laughter was none other than Han Hai. Is it amusing? Yi Li gazed coolly at Han Hai. To Yi Li's surprise, Han Hai started clapping his hands. Clap, clap, clap. Quite a performance. Did you bribe this first-tier evolved being? You made him say there's a powerful dark race member and 4 7th-tier zombies. I'm curious about your motives, Han Hai said smugly. Han Hai's words made sense, at least that's what the people in the hall believed. Before Yi Li could reply, Han Hai spoke again, let me answer for you. You're a friend of all Qi. Qi is dead now, and you did this to avenge him, right? As for the idiots I sent to capture Qi and Luo Li, one presumed they're all dead at your hands. By the way, I can't discern your cultivation tier, but you've probably suppressed your spiritual power, right? Han Hai's arguments were logical, and the people in the hall found themselves persuaded. Yi Li chuckled inwardly, thinking that Han Hai had missed his calling as a detective. Unfortunately, he didn't need to suppress his spiritual power. He was a 7th-tier evolved being, and could a mere 5th-tier evolved being detect that? Now, your scheme has been exposed by me. Aren't you supposed to be at a loss? Why do you seem so indifferent? Han Hai's face took on a sly expression. The genetic warriors of the Flame organization in the hall also laughed. They knew Yi Li's fate was going to be tragic, but to what extent, they weren't sure. Luo Yu felt that Han Hai might be right. She looked at Yi Li with some reluctance. After all, Yi Li's actions indirectly helped her. However, the S-tier evolved being on the ground didn't laugh. Instead, his terror reached new heights. Suddenly, he saw a faint smile appear on Yi Li's jade-like face. This S-tier evolved being fainted instantly. Hee hee. Yi Li smiled slowly at Han Hai. Han Hai was taken aback. He couldn't understand why Yi Li was still able to smile. What are you laughing at? Han Hai stared coldly at Yi Li. Yi Li pondered for a few seconds, then looked at Han Hai and said, believe it or not, you're about to die. Silence, a deadly silence. Even if they thought for 1,000 years, no one in the hall would have expected Yi Li to say something like this. Luo Yu's icy face also showed confusion. She couldn't understand why Yi Li was speaking so arrogantly. Could it be? He knew he was going to die, so he deliberately said this. Since you're so confident, I'll let you be confident for a moment. One don't believe I'm about to die, Han Hai said calmly, looking at Yi Li. However, as soon as Han Hai finished speaking, Yi Li activated his swift steps and disappeared on the spot. Before anyone could make sense of it, Yi Li had already appeared just a few steps away from Han Hai. Yi Li raised his finger, and golden spiritual light surrounded it as he declared, I have a technique that can pierce the heavens. Chapter 199, The Death of Han Hai. As the words fell, Yi Li unleashed a pointed attack, and a terrifying golden light pierced through Han Hai's thigh. Han Hai was a 5th-tier evolved being, a realm where Yi Li could easily achieve a quick kill. Unfortunately, Yi Li wanted to instill even more terror. The moment the light pierced through Han Hai fell from his throne. Oh! Han Hai let out a gruesome scream akin to a pig being slaughtered. The Gene warriors in the hall were petrified, their faces filled with utmost fear as they watched Yi Li. Even Luo Yu stared at Yi Li's back in shock. She couldn't believe Yi Li was actually so terrifying. A 5th-tier evolved being had his thigh pierced through with a single strike. The people in the hall barely had time to process what had happened before Han Hai's earth-shattering scream echoed. Cold sweat poured down their foreheads, and they were already paralyzed with fear. Yi Li's face showed a hint of amusement. He calmly gazed at Han Hai lying on the ground, still screaming like a pig. He spoke slowly, "Do you now believe you're about to die?" As these words left his lips, Han Hai felt as if he had fallen into an icy abyss. He even forgot the excruciating pain as he stared at Yi Li in sheer terror. You. Han Hai couldn't even form a complete sentence. He stared at Yi Li in terror and despair. At this moment, Yi Li's hair was fluttering in the wind, and his face remained calm. But in Han Hai's eyes, he appeared infinitely horrifying. Yi Li looked like a true demon at this moment. Yi Li looked at Han Hai's terrified face with indifference and shook his head inwardly. Ants would always be ants. He slowly raised his finger, and the golden light of spirituality once again wrapped around it. The people in the hall watched in horror as the golden light enveloped Yi Li's finger. They knew that with a single strike, Han Hai would meet his demise. "Don't kill me. Please, one don't want to die." At this point, Han Hai cared more about his life than the pain he was feeling. He hastily kowtowed to Yi Li, begging for mercy. He didn't want to die, not when he had just become the leader of the Flame Fire organization. His future achievements were limitless, and if he died now. In this wilderness where human life was as fragile as grass, true displays of humanity were rare. If Yi Li was still trash at this moment, would Han Hai spare him? A faint smile appeared on Yi Li's face. "I beg you, spare my life, I beg you," Han Hai continued to beg on his knees. Unfortunately, before he could finish his plea, Yi Li's finger had already descended. This one strike was utterly terrifying. As this finger fell, Han Hai's life disappeared from this world forever. His eyes widened more than they ever had before, unable to believe he had died in this manner. In the underworld, a ghost was newly added, but in the mortal realm, there was no more Han Hai. To Yi Li, this phrase applied to everyone. Chief Han is dead. The genetic warriors in the hall were horrified beyond measure. After all, Han Hai was a fifth-tier evolved being, yet he had died so effortlessly. Yi Li slowly turned around, his gaze fixed on the people in the hall. The people in the hall trembled violently. None dared to utter a word because their entire bodies were quaking with fear. "Are you all very afraid?" Yi Li asked slowly. Of course, the people in the hall were terrified, to the point where words couldn't describe their fear. Chapter 200, Your sister is outside. Luo Yu looked at Yi Li in astonishment. She had never encountered anyone like Yi Li before. Dominant, terrifying, decisive and ruthless. She couldn't fathom why there were people like Yi Li in the world. She truly couldn't understand. Yi Li gazed calmly at Luo Yu. From the moment he entered the hall, he knew that Luo Yu was an ice-cold person. However, no matter how cold one was, when they encountered Yi Li, they would be astonished. It was the same for Lu Qingxue, and now it was the same for Luo Yu. "Your sister is currently outside," Yi Li said calmly, looking at Luo Yu. Luo Yu was taken aback. She hadn't expected Yi Li to say such words. "Is that true? Believe it or not, it's up to you." With that, Yi Li began walking towards the exit. He didn't like explaining himself and didn't need to explain to anyone. As for the genetic warriors in the hall, they were nothing more than opportunists. Now that Han Hai was dead, they naturally assumed that Yi Li was Luo Yu's backing, and they would naturally fear both Yi Li and Luo Yu. Making people fear you was often better than earning their respect. Yi Li had just arrived in the wilderness area, and he didn't want to slaughter an organization at random. It served no purpose, as he had never been a bloodthirsty person. Luo Yu watched Yi Li's departing figure, pondering for a few seconds before following him. The genetic warriors in the hall saw Luo Yu following Yi Li, and they glanced at each other, nodding at each other before also following. Now that Han Hai was dead, they naturally acknowledged Luo Yu as the new leader. Even though Luo Yu was only a second-tier evolved being, she had Yi Li, the great demon king, behind her. Luo Yu and the group of flame warriors followed Yili to the gate. Although the flame base was not very large, it was still a castle, so there was some distance to cover. Before entering, Yili instructed the Apocalypse Legion to protect Luo Li. Now that he had arrived at Luo Li's side, she seemed delighted. "Senior, you're finally out." Just as Luo Li finished speaking, she saw Luo Yu and a group of flame organization members coming out. "Sister!" Luo Li called out happily. The little girl knew that with Yi Li's 4 7th-tier zombies, he would surely avenge her. Luo Li rushed into Luo Yu's embrace, and Luo Yu, looking at Luo Li, suddenly felt an inexplicable desire to cry. If it weren't for Yi Li, she might have become Han Hai's woman by now. Luo Yu raised her head and looked at Yi Li. By her side, there were over 100 flame organization members, and they all turned their gazes towards Yi Li. However, as soon as they looked, they all took several steps back in fear, their faces filled with terror as they stared at the 4 7th-tier zombies by Yi Li's side. The first one stood over 1.9 meters tall, with a red cloak, silver boxing gloves, and a handsome face. The second one appeared to be about 10 years old, but he was broad and stout, weighing nearly 100 kilograms. The third one wore a fiery red long dress, her 3,000 green strands of hair cascading down, her face as delicate as jade, as if she had been carved by the world's greatest sculptor. The fourth one wore a white princess-style dress and looked like an 8-year-old porcelain doll, incredibly adorable. Although their faces were almost devoid of any signs of decay, their red eyes let everyone know that they were 7th-tier zombies. It was only now that they finally understood that what the first-tier evolved being had said was all true. Why panic? The sky hasn't fallen yet. Leader, the sky has fallen. The crowd couldn't help but recall the conversation between the first-tier evolved being and Han Hai. Chapter 201, Your Way of Receiving Guests. They remembered clearly what the first-tier evolved being had said. He had mentioned a powerful dark race and 4 7th-tier zombies. Initially, they had doubts, but now they had no choice but to believe. 4 7th-tier zombies had arrived at the Flame headquarters. Did this mean that the young man was indeed a formidable member of the dark race? With this thought, everyone became even more terrified. They couldn't fathom how strong a dark race member capable of controlling 4 7th-tier zombies could be. They really couldn't. Luo Yu was also in shock. Everyone knew that the dark race was malevolent, but why did she not sense any evil from Yi Li? On the contrary, she felt that he was a good person. They were wondering, but Yi Li had already seen through their thoughts. Unfortunately, Yi Li naturally didn't care about their ridiculous ideas. Ever since he had practiced the ancient devil tome, he had become a demon. The dark race? What a joke! Is this how the Flame organization treats guests? Yi Li looked at Luo Yu and said calmly. Han Hai had died, and Luo Yu had naturally become the new leader of the Flame Fire organization. Luo Yu was momentarily stunned. Her father had described the dark race as irredeemable. But Yi Li spoke like a normal person. Luo Yu couldn't connect Yi Li with the dark race. Sister, although Senior is from the dark race, he is a good person, Luo Li said to Luo Yu. Luo Yu finally came to her senses and hastily said to Yi Li, Senior, please come in. Yi Li didn't say much and entered with the Apocalypse Legion following behind him. He had just arrived in the wilderness area, and there were many things he still didn't understand. Besides, it was getting dark now. He would just stay at this Flame base for a while. After arriving at the Flame organization's hall, Luo Yu quickly invited Yi Li to sit down. Yi Li was extremely powerful and had 4 7th-tier zombies with him. If they provoked anyone, it could spell disaster for the Flame organization. The Flame Fire organization is the lifelong dedication of her father, and she naturally doesn't want it to perish under her leadership. After traveling for so long, during which Yi Li didn't eat anything, it was safe to say that he was feeling a bit hungry. Does the flame organization usually not prepare food for guests? Yi Li asked, looking at Luo Yu with indifference. Not only Luo Yu but all the flame fire members in the hall were startled, fearing that Yi Li would be displeased. Senior, we have plenty of delicious food in the flame organization, Luo Li said sweetly to Yi Li. The wilderness area was vast, and not all animals had been infected by the zombie virus. Many animals remained uninfected. They had naturally become the source of food for human organizations in the wilderness. Birds flew in the sky, geese roamed the clouds, cattle and sheep grazed underground, crabs shed their shells in the rivers, and there were countless dishes to choose from. Luo Yu promptly had the flame fire chef prepare a table full of exotic delicacies. However, no one dared to pick up their chopsticks at the long table. Yi Li, on the other hand, ate quickly. His eating speed was just as fast as his killing speed. Sometimes, by the time others saw his butcher knife, the person was already dead. Sometimes, by the time others saw him start to eat, he had already finished. Besides being a demon, Yi Li was also a master of the blade. Because his weapon was the dragon-slaying blade. In the world of martial arts novels, the difference between a master of the blade and an ordinary person was that the former was better at using a blade instead of enduring hunger better. This was his first meal in the past few days. After eating, he could go without food for 3 days and 3 nights. Although he had plenty of food in his system space, he was simply tired of it. If someone asked him why he didn't pack some to eat later when he got hungry, he would say that it would make him look more like a beggar than a master of the blade. Chapter 202. I've turned Ah Chi into a zombie. After Yi Li finished his meal, the people in the hall began to exchange glances once again. With a formidable figure like Yi Li present, they felt extremely uncomfortable, let alone eating. Senior, thank you, Luo Yu said firmly to Yi Li. If it weren't for Yi Li, she didn't know what would have happened to her and her sister. I only promised Ah Chi to take good care of your sister, Yi Li said indifferently. Luo Yu was taken aback. Ah Chi was her father's adopted son. Could it be that Yi Li and Ah Chi were friends? Senior, where is Ah Chi? Luo Yu asked Yi Li. Yi Li contemplated for a moment before slowly saying, I've already turned Ah Chi into a zombie. What? As soon as these words came out, everyone in the hall gasped in shock. Turned Ah Chi into a zombie? They had thought that Yi Li and Ah Chi were friends, but they never expected that Yi Li would turn Ah Chi into a zombie. With this thought, the people in the hall were once again filled with fear, as they were afraid that Yi Li might also turn them into zombies. Zombies were almost like the living dead, and becoming a zombie meant that they were already dead. However, they were not worthy of having Yi Li turn them into zombies. Do you all think that I, Yi Li, belong to the dark race? Yi Li looked at the people in the hall with a faint smile. The people in the hall were shocked. Controlling 4 7th-tier zombies and turning Ah Chi into a zombie, what else could Yi Li be if not a member of the dark race? Senior, aren't you from the dark race? Luo Li asked in confusion, biting her finger. Yi Li smiled lightly. The dark race? If I, Yi Li, were from the dark race, you would all be dead by now, Yi Li said slowly. The people were stunned by his words. They thought that Yi Li made a lot of sense. In the wilderness area, there were indeed many members of the dark race, and they had encountered some low-level dark race members who were very evil. If Yi Li didn't have 4 7th-tier zombies, no one would think that he could be a member of the dark race. Senior, isn't it true that only members of the dark race can control zombies? Luo Li asked, her small face filled with doubt. When this question was asked, Luo Yu and everyone else in the hall turned their attention to Yi Li, wanting to know his answer. Yi Li smiled faintly. You only know about the dark race, but you don't know about the demons. Demons? Everyone in the hall was once again stunned. This was the first time they had heard the word demons, and they had no idea what it meant. Senior, are you a demon? Luo Li seemed extremely curious about Yi Li. Perhaps, Yi Li replied slowly. After killing the 7th tier's soul spirit and Xiao Tian and advancing to the 3rd level of the ancient devil tome, although he was still a 7th tier evolved being, his strength was already sufficient to contend with an 8th tier evolved being. Senior, are demons stronger than members of the dark race? Luo Yu suddenly asked Yi Li. Yi Li smiled and looked at Luo Yu. What do you think? In the apocalyptic continent, there were many members of the dark race, but there was only one demon. That was him, Yi Li. The people exchanged glances, but now that they knew Yi Li wasn't from the dark race, they breathed a sigh of relief. After all, Yi Li didn't seem to have any intention of turning them into zombies. Please arrange a room for me, one need to rest, Yi Li said calmly. Luo Yu immediately had the best room arranged for Yi Li. After entering the room, Yi Li lay down on the bed. The moon outside the window was unusually large, and he slowly drifted off to sleep. Chapter 203, Luo Yu enters Yi Li's room at night. Yi Li was sleeping drowsily. As a 7th tier evolved being, his perception had reached a terrifying level, and he didn't need Ada to guard him anymore. Suddenly, the door to Yi Li's room was pushed open. Even though Yi Li was half asleep, he could wake up instantly. He activated his heavenly spirit eyes and saw that the person who had entered was none other than Luo Yu. He was puzzled, wondering why Luo Yu had come to his room in the middle of the night. After entering the room where Yi Li was sleeping, Luo Yu hesitated for a moment. She paused and looked at Yi Li on the bed. Yi Li continued to feign sleep. He was curious about Luo Yu's intentions. Luo Yu swallowed saliva and walked to his bed step by step. Yi Li thought that in some movies, some scenes of killing were like this. Would Luo Yu take out a knife and stab him? However, it was no longer possible. After all, he had already discovered Luo Yu. To Yi Li's surprise, Luo Yu didn't take out a knife but still walked towards Yi Li's bed. Yi Li still pretended not to know. He was more and more puzzled about Luo Yu's purpose. Finally, Luo Yu walked to the bed. The moon was exceptionally bright tonight, and even without turning on the lights in the room, Yi Li could clearly see Luo Yu's delicate and hesitant face. A few seconds later, Luo Yu said in a low voice, "If one could become your disciple, could the flame organization become stronger?" In the wilderness area, the Flame Organization was a small and vulnerable organization, constantly at risk of being wiped out by other organizations or the Dark Race. But Senior definitely won't accept me as a disciple, one can only... Luo Yu didn't finish her sentence, but her delicate face had turned bright red. Yi Li's hearing was extraordinary, and he already knew what Luo Yu meant. Luo Yu simply wanted to become his disciple, but she was afraid that he would refuse. So she wanted to use her own body to bribe him. Unfortunately, this was not the way to become one's disciple, but rather something one would do when they liked someone but couldn't win their affection. Luo Yu took 2 more steps forward. At this moment, Yi Li spoke up. If he didn't say anything, Luo Yu would have climbed onto the bed. "I didn't expect you to be such a motivated young lady." Yi Li's voice suddenly rang out, causing Luo Yu to turn pale with shock. Luo Yu didn't know how to respond. She really didn't know. Yi Li slowly got up, looking at Luo Yu. "Tell me, why do you want to become my disciple?" Luo Yu was startled. She realized that Yi Li had heard everything she said earlier. She had thought Yi Li was fast asleep. Now it seemed that her plan to bribe him with her body and then become his disciple was rather ridiculous in Yi Li's eyes. "I'll ask you again, why do you want to become my disciple?" "Don't make me say it a 3rd time, Yi Li said slowly. Hearing this, Luo Yu's pupils were constricted quickly. She was afraid that Yi Li would be angry because if Yi Li was angry, the entire flame organization would undoubtedly be wiped out. I'm too weak. In the wilderness area, the flame organization is just a tiny organization. I'm only a 2nd-tier evolved being. In the entire flame organization, the strongest among us are only third-tier evolved beings. Our current strength is at constant risk of being wiped out. So, I thought. Chapter 204. Do you really want to be my disciple? So you want to become my disciple? Yi Li interrupted Luo Yu. Luo Yu was startled. She looked at Yi Li's face and, for some reason, whenever she gazed at his face, her heart couldn't help but beat violently. Yes, Luo Yu gritted her teeth and nodded. Since she had been found out, she had to admit it. Even if her senior was angry with her, she would accept it. Yi Li felt somewhat moved. Luo Yu was about the same age as him, and making such a decision was not easy for her. Men can shoulder the world's burdens. But can women do the same? Do you really want to be my disciple? Yi Li asked again. Having been in this parallel world for so long, he had never taken on a disciple. Perhaps it wouldn't be a bad idea to accept one. Senior, I really want to be your disciple. Luo Yu's delicate face was filled with determination. Yi Li smiled faintly. In the moonlight, he appeared like a prince from a fairy tale, with unforgettable eyes that left anyone who saw them mesmerized. They were as tranquil as the night and as deep as the sea. What's your genetic talent? Yi Li asked. S grade. As expected, in larger areas, the average level of genetic talent was higher. Luo Yu was a second-tier evolved being at the age of 19, which meant she had an S-grade genetic talent. Grade genetic talents could never reach the second tier no matter how hard they trained. If you want to be my disciple, you'll need to do 3 things first, Yi Li said slowly. When Luo Yu heard this, her eyes widened. She had thought that Yi Li would flatly refuse her, but now, there was a glimmer of hope. Senior, what are the 3 things? Luo Yu asked. Her heart was resolute. She knew she had to do these 3 things well to help the Flame organization grow stronger. Flame was her father's lifelong work. Although her father was killed by Han Hai, the latter had died now, so her vengeance was already cleared. Luo Yu now had only one goal, to make Flame stronger, and to do that, she believed that she needed to become Yi Li's disciple. The first thing is to find a weapon and swing it at my head. I want dodge, Yi Li looked at Luo Yu and said. Luo Yu was stunned by his words. She had never imagined that Yi Li would say something like that. Find a weapon and swing it at Senior's head? It was too. What's wrong? Are you afraid? Yi Li revealed a wicked smile. Luo Yu's delicate face froze as she looked at Yi Li's sinister smile. She felt a deep shiver in her soul. If you're afraid, you can leave. 1. Yi Li will never accept someone as timid as a mouse as my disciple, Yi Li said slowly. With these words, Luo Yu trembled all over. Finally, she gathered her courage and looked at Yi Li. Senior, I'm not afraid.
With that, Luo Yu left the room, presumably to find a weapon. Yi Li watched her leave, and his purpose in doing this was simply to toughen up Luo Yu. In the wilderness area, without courage, how could one take a single step forward? A few minutes later, Luo Yu returned, holding a knife in her hand. It was just a very ordinary knife, made of steel, and compared to the dragon-slaying blade, it was like the difference between heaven and earth.
Chapter 205, Yi Li's head is as hard as iron. Luo Yu stared in astonishment at Yi Li. She couldn't understand why Yi Li wanted her to do this. Although she knew Yi Li was a formidable evolved being, she couldn't even fathom the consequences of swinging a knife down on his head. Come on, strike my head hard with the knife in your hand. Don't hesitate, Yi Li calmly said while looking at Luo Yu. Luo Yu, trembling with the knife in her hand, looked at Yi Li's indifferent face. She truly didn't dare to do it. What's the matter? Are you afraid? Someone like you, who's afraid of such a small thing, actually wants to become my disciple. Yi Li said lightly. In the cruel wilderness, if you can't even do such a simple thing, what else can you be but a coward? I'm not a coward. With her face flushed, Luo Yu looked at Yi Li resolutely. If you're not a coward, do it, Yi Li slowly continued. At these words, Luo Yu bit her lip, and after a few seconds, she finally squeezed out a word through her gritted teeth, all right. As soon as she said so, Luo Yu raised the knife in her hand. Although the knife in her hand was trash, under the moonlight, it still emitted a cold light. Senior, Luo Yu still wanted to say something, but Yi Li interrupted her. What else do you have to hesitate about? Hurry up. A bored look appeared on Yi Li's handsome face. As soon as he said that, Luo Yu no longer hesitated. She raised the knife in her hand high and slashed at Yi Li's head. The moment the knife fell, Luo Yu closed her eyes. She didn't want to see what would happen next. The knife struck Yi Li's head. Clang! However, there was no scene of blood splattering. Instead, the knife made a sound of colliding with steel as it struck Yi Li's head. Every day, zombies produced treasure chests, and within those chests were various attribute points. So Yi Li's defense had reached a terrifying level. Coupled with his 7th tier evolved being status, how could a 2nd tier evolved being wielding a simple mundane knife possibly harm him? Hearing this sound, Luo Yu quickly opened her eyes. Her expression froze as she looked at Yi Li. She couldn't believe it. She truly couldn't believe what she was seeing. Yi Li's head was as hard as iron. For a moment, Luo Yu didn't know whether to be shocked or pleased. Meanwhile, Yi Li's face remained as calm as water, as if nothing had happened at all. You hesitated to strike my head with the knife because you were afraid one would die. Do you really think a small mundane knife could harm me? Yi Li looked at Luo Yu and said calmly. Luo Yu was startled because Yi Li's words were absolutely correct. She was afraid that Yi Li would die if she slashed his head. However, she never could have imagined that Yi Li's head was this tough. Senior, does this mean I've succeeded with the first task? Luo Yu cautiously asked Yi Li. She hoped to complete the 3 tasks as soon as possible so she could become Yi Li's disciple. Yi Li nodded and said, yes, you've succeeded in the first task. Upon hearing this, Luo Yu was overjoyed. She quickly asked, Senior, what is the 2nd task? She was eager to complete the 3 tasks and become Yi Li's disciple. Yi Li contemplated for a few seconds and then said, let's talk about it tomorrow. For now, one needs some rest. With that, Yi Li yawned, and a lazy expression appeared on his face. Chapter 206, Heading to the falling rock mountain range. The sunlight streamed through the window and onto Yi Li's face. He opened his eyes and stretched lazily. Obtained zombie treasure chest X7. The system's prompt sounded in Yi Li's mind. Yi Li promptly opened the zombie treasure chests. Received 300 gene points, 300 strength points, 300 speed points, and 300 defense points. Received the exclusive zombie skill, death-dealing triple ghost sword. Yi Li thought it was like getting whatever he wanted. At the moment, swordsman Ah Chi only had the sword-breaking sword skill and lacked an exclusive zombie skill. He checked the description of the death-dealing triple ghost sword skill, death-dealing triple ghost sword, a D-level exclusive zombie skill. After upgrading to S level, it can kill without leaving a trace. Without much thought, Yi Li integrated the death-dealing triple ghost sword skill into swordsman Ah Chi's body. Next, he checked the number of zombies in his system space. Besides the Apocalypse Legion, there was 1 ZTH tier male zombie and 1 5th tier male zombie. His primary goal upon entering the wilderness was to upgrade swordsman Ah Chi, as his current level was far too low, only at the 1st tier. After a simple morning routine, just as he was preparing to leave his room, someone knocked on the door. Senior, are you awake? It was none other than Luo Yu. Yi Li opened the door and looked at Luo Yu indifferently. What's the matter? Senior, what's the second task? Luo Yu was quite curious. Yi Li thought for a moment and then said, there are probably many dark race members and zombies in the wilderness, right? Luo Yu nodded and replied, yes, the wilderness is vast, and the distribution of zombies and dark race members varies in different areas. We're in the northern region of the wilderness, and most of the zombies and dark race members here are in the Falling Rock Mountain Range. In that case, let's go to the Falling Rock Mountain Range, Yi Li said slowly. Luo Yu was shocked. The Falling Rock Mountain Range was the stronghold of dark race members and zombies in the northern wilderness. For decades, no one had dared to venture into it. Senior, are we really going to the Falling Rock Mountain Range? Luo Yu asked, unable to believe it. If you want to be my disciple, you'll have to listen to me. Of course, you can choose not to, Yi Li said calmly. With that, Yi Li walked out. There were two purposes for going to the Falling Rock Mountain Range, firstly to level up swordsman Al Chi, and secondly to allow Luo Yu to gain some experience. Seeing Yi Li walk out, Luo Yu hurriedly followed him. After settling everything, Luo Yu and Yi Li left the flame base and headed towards the Falling Rock Mountain Range. The Falling Rock Mountain Range was quite far from their current location, and Luo Yu had never been there before. She only knew that the journey to the Falling Rock Mountain Range was fraught with numerous difficulties and dangers. Shortly after leaving the flame base, Yi Li and Luo Yu arrived at a plain where many infected animals were engaged in mutual slaughter. These animals had already been infected by the zombie virus. Roar! When the savage wolves and fierce tigers saw humans approaching, they immediately rushed towards Yi Li and Luo Yu. There were more than 50 of these wolves and tigers, all at the 7th level. In Yi Li's eyes, they were quite weak. Alda. After giving Alda the command, Alda swung his fist with great force. Before the wolves and tigers could reach Yi Li, they were melted away by Alda's punch. Luo Yu knew that 7th-tier zombies were formidable, but she never expected them to be this unstoppable. Let's keep going, Yi Li said. Chapter 207, Yi Li gets bitten by a zombie. After traveling for several days, Yi Li and Luo Yu finally arrived at the foot of the Falling Rock Mountain Range. Senior, the Falling Rock Mountain Range is vast, and there are many powerful organizations here. They seem to be researching a drug that can upgrade genetic talents, Luo Yu said as she looked at Yi Li. Yi Li wasn't interested in these matters. Right now, he just wanted swordsman Ah Chi to level up as quickly as possible. As long as those organizations didn't provoke him, he would ignore them. But if they did provoke him, he would make them understand what true fear meant. Let's go up, Yi Li said, looking at Luo Yu. What surprised Yi Li, however, was that although the Falling Rock Mountain Range was called a mountain range, it was nothing like the mountains in Huaxia. The mountains were barren and covered with numerous wooden houses, forming a dense cluster. The wilderness was indeed a unique place. If you didn't know about it, you might think you had traveled back in time to ancient times. The Falling Rock Mountain Range was incredibly vast, and no one knew exactly how large it was. Yi Li and Luo Yu finally arrived there. Looking at the countless wooden houses, it had a touch of the Warring States period. Roar! Roar! At that moment, a sound that was all too familiar to Yi Li echoed in his ears. Yi Li looked ahead and saw hundreds of zombies. What surprised him was that all these zombies were only level 1 ordinary zombies. It seemed that the wilderness wasn't as impressive as he had thought. Yi Li felt somewhat disappointed. The Falling Rock Mountain Range had a formidable reputation in the northern wilderness, and Luo Yu was only a 2nd-tier evolved being with limited combat experience. Fear appeared on Luo Yu's delicate face. She knew that these were hundreds of zombies, and it was a terrifying sight. The Apocalypse Legion, Ada, Baiwawa, Hongye, Yutong, and swordsman Ah Chi stood on both sides of Yi Li. These zombies, upon seeing humans, immediately rushed towards Yi Li and Luo Yu in a frenzy. Yi Li had a somewhat indifferent expression on his face as he found a stone step and sat down. Boom! Da struck with a punch, and his control over the force was just right. It didn't kill the zombies but rendered them unable to fight. With just one punch, over 100 zombies fell to the ground. Yi Li opened the synthesis grid in his mind and began to synthesize them. All of these zombies were only IS-level ordinary zombies. Yi Li combined them into one 7th level male zombie and one 7th level female zombie. Seeing this scene, Luo Yu was stunned. She swore she was truly stunned. Her father had told her that the dark race could control zombies. Yi Li had told her that he was a demon. It wasn't until now that she realized that a demon could not only control zombies but also upgrade their levels. As for how the upgrade worked, Luo Yu assumed it was done through synthesizing zombies. Otherwise, why would the number of zombies decrease? Roar! Suddenly, a 7th level advanced male zombie rushed towards Yi Li from behind. Senior, danger! Luo Yu saw this and immediately shouted. In Yi Li's eyes, a 7th level male zombie was just a speck of dust. Yi Li didn't make any moves, nor did he instruct the Apocalypse Legion to do anything. The 7th level male zombie bit down on Yi Li's shoulder. Clang! Before Yi Li could even feel a hint of pain, the teeth of the 7th level male zombie had all fallen out. Seeing this, Luo Yu's pupils rapidly contracted. Bitten by a zombie, one would turn into a zombie, this was common knowledge. In other words, would Senior become a zombie? Thinking of this, fear overwhelmed Luo Yu's delicate face. Chapter 208, A Giant Centipede. After the 7th level male zombie bit Yi Li's shoulder, there was an instant sound of steel clashing between its teeth and Yi Li's shoulder. As the sound of steel collision rang out, the 7th level male zombie fell to the ground. Yi Li had just created a level 7 male zombie and a level 7 female zombie. Now after Yi Li synthesized them, the two level 7 male zombies became a level 8 male zombie. To Yi Li, 8th level zombies were far too weak. Yi Li turned to look at Luo Yu, who was staring at him with a terrified expression. Are you scared? Yi Li asked with some confusion. Senior, you were bitten by a zombie just now, Luo Yu said in shock. Yi Li didn't think much of it. He was immune to the zombie virus, so it couldn't harm him in the slightest. It's fine, the zombie virus doesn't affect me, Yi Li said calmly. Luo Yu was taken aback for a moment, but then she realized that Yi Li was on a higher level than the dark race and naturally wouldn't be afraid of the zombie virus. She scolded herself for overreacting. Yi Li thought that this might be the outskirts of the Falling Rock mountain range. Otherwise, there was no reason for most of the zombies here to be only IS-level zombies. He used his heavenly spirit eyes to check and found that there were still quite a few zombies in this small town. The town was full of wooden houses and had a unique charm with flowers, grass, and water. Since he had come here, it was time for a crazy synthesis. Yi Li released the zombies from the Apocalypse Legion, as well as the 4th-tier male and female zombies from the system space, and let them attract the zombies. After walking for so long to get to the Falling Rock mountain range, Yi Li felt a bit hungry. He took out a box of food from the system space and started eating. Luo Yu was naturally hungry too, and when she saw Yi Li eating bread and milk, she swallowed her saliva, clearly wanting to eat as well. Come and eat, Yi Li said slowly. Upon hearing this, Luo Yu hurriedly walked over to Yi Li and began to eat and drink with him. After eating, the Apocalypse Legion also attracted a horde of zombies. The zombies came from all directions, numbering over 1,000. Luo Yu had never seen so many zombies before. As a second-tier evolved being, she couldn't help but tremble in fear. Yi Li didn't even blink because more than 1,000 zombies were too few. Considering the number of zombies he had synthesized in the Annan Base City and Huangjiang Base City, these 1,000+ zombies were nothing. "Let's begin," Yili said indifferently. With his command, the zombies from the Apocalypse Legion began to act. These over 1,000 zombies were all Justice-level ordinary zombies and were no match for the Apocalypse Legion. The entire process was incredibly quick. Luo Yu hadn't even had time to see clearly, and over 1,000 zombies had all fallen to the ground. Yili opened the synthesis grid in his mind and began to combine these zombies. With over 1,000 IS-level zombies, he just managed to synthesize a IS-tier male zombie. Swordmaster Al-Chi was currently a IS-tier zombie. After synthesizing the IS-tier zombie with Swordmaster Al-Chi, he became a second-tier zombie. Luo Yu was dumbfounded, but Yili paid no attention. He knew that anyone with him would be shocked. Squeak, squeak. Suddenly, an eerie aura approached. Yili knew that it was Dark Race members, but they weren't particularly powerful Dark Race members. A centipede. What a huge centipede. Before Yili could turn around, he heard Luo Yu exclaim in astonishment. He slowly turned around and saw a giant 1,000-foot-long centipede crawling towards them. It was a second-tier Dark Race member, but it posed no real threat.
Chapter 209, The Second Task, Killing the Centipede. This centipede was entirely black, several meters long, and it was crawling towards them at a rapid pace, appearing extremely terrifying. "You deal with this centipede," Yili said to Luo Yu, looking at her slowly. Luo Yu was taken aback. Although she was also a second-tier evolved being, facing such a terrifying giant centipede, she wasn't sure how to proceed. "The second task is to kill this centipede," Yili continued. When Luo Yu heard this, for some reason, her shocked face instantly became determined. She wanted to become Yili's disciple. She wanted to make Flame grow stronger. Just as the black centipede was getting close to them, Luo Yu made her move. She raised her palm, and a fierce fire enveloped it. After striking with her palm, the fire transformed into a long dragon-like stream, rushing towards the black centipede. This was the ultimate skill of flame organization, something only a few people within Flame could perform. After the intense fire struck the black centipede, it started burning on its body. However, the black centipede's exoskeleton was as tough as steel, and within seconds, the flames disappeared, leaving no visible damage on the centipede. Generally, when comparing second-tier human evolved beings to second-tier evolved beings of the Dark Race, the latter were typically stronger. How is this possible? How is this possible? Luo Yu was astonished. While she thought she might not be able to defeat this black centipede, she didn't expect her strongest attack to have no effect at all. Yili stood with folded arms, showing no intention of helping. He just wanted to see how Luo Yu would handle this critical situation. Of course, he would intervene when necessary. The black centipede seemed to be provoked by the previous attack and came charging at Luo Yu in a frenzy. In the moment of Luo Yu's astonishment, the black centipede was already right in front of her. At this moment, Luo Yu finally snapped back to reality. The black centipede had opened its mouth wide, ready to swallow her in one gulp. She hastily dodged, and as the black centipede's attack missed, it roared in anger and immediately swung its body towards Luo Yu. Luo Yu attempted to evade the sweeping motion but was too slow. The tail of the black centipede struck her heavily, and she was sent flying, landing on the ground and coughing up blood. As soon as Luo Yu hit the ground, the black centipede swiftly crawled towards her without giving her any chance to react. Meanwhile, Yili continued to watch, his expression unchanged. The black centipede was merely a second-tier Dark Race member, and he could kill it 100 times over in an instant.
Seeing the black centipede's large mouth about to devour her, Luo Yu rolled away quickly. After rolling a few meters, she got up from the ground, her delicate face now filled with determination. The black centipede once again missed its attack, and it appeared even angrier. Roar! After a furious roar, the black centipede charged at Luo Yu once more. Luo Yu looked around and saw an iron rod not far away. Suddenly, a plan formed in her mind. She took 3 quick steps and reached the iron rod, picking it up just as the black centipede was about to bite down on her. She raised the iron rod and thrust it forcefully into the centipede's open mouth. The black centipede's mouth was blocked by the iron rod. At the same time, Luo Yu raised her palm, and a fierce fire surged into the black centipede's mouth. Instantly, the black centipede began thrashing violently, emitting a hair-raising screech. Chapter 210, Swordsman Ah Chi, 5th tier zombie. Not long after, the black centipede was completely burned by the fierce fire from the inside out, reduced to ashes. Luo Yu let out a sigh of relief, wiping the sweat from her forehead. Just a moment ago, she had even thought she might die. She looked at Yi Li and noticed that his face remained impassive, as if he hadn't seen anything at all. She felt a sense of understanding. After all, the black centipede was just a second-tier dark race member, which must have seemed pitifully weak in the eyes of Yi Li. Luo Yu thought that she had completed the 2nd task, and now, all she had to do was finish the 3rd task, and she could officially become Yi Li's disciple. Senior, what is the 3rd task? Luo Yu looked at Yi Li confidently, having enough faith in herself to complete the 3rd task after killing the black centipede. Yi Li thought for a moment and then looked at Luo Yu, saying, "Don't call me master." Luo Yu was taken aback. She had just completed 2 tasks, and she never would have expected Yi Li to say something like this. "Why, senior?" Luo Yu looked at Yi Li. She was just 1 task away from becoming Yi Li's disciple, and now he was telling her not to call him master. Yi Li hesitated for a moment. Why? Because the 3rd task is not to call me master after becoming my disciple but to continue to call me senior. He thought he had made it quite clear, so he couldn't understand why Luo Yu seemed to have trouble grasping it. Did her comprehension skills really falter so much? Upon hearing this, surprise flashed across Luo Yu's delicate face, followed by overwhelming joy. "Senior, so I'm your disciple now?" Luo Yu felt happiness had come so suddenly. "Yes." Yi Li nodded. Upon hearing Yi Li's affirmative answer, no words could describe Luo Yu's emotions at that moment. She knew that as long as she could become Yi Li's disciple, she would become a powerful evolved being, and Flame would grow stronger because of her. Yi Li didn't say much, thinking he would discuss it further when they returned to Flame. Right now, the most important thing was to upgrade Swordsman Ah Chi, who was currently only a 2nd-tier zombie and quite weak. Shortly after, Yi Li sent the Apocalypse Legion to attract zombies. To his surprise, this time, the Apocalypse Legion only attracted a few hundred zombies. Yi Li thought the number of zombies here was too small. After combining these few hundred zombies, the previously synthesized 8th level male zombie and 7th level female zombie became a 10th level male zombie and a 9th level female zombie. "Senior, should we continue going further?" Luo Yu asked Yi Li. Yi Li nodded. They had invested so much time here, there was no way they would leave Swordsman Ah Chi as just a 2nd-tier zombie. So, Yi Li led the Apocalypse Legion and Luo Yu further into the area. As they progressed deeper, the number of zombies increased. Yi Li began to synthesize zombies frantically, and his face showed excitement. In just 1 afternoon, Swordsman Ah Chi became a 4th-tier zombie. He already had a 4th-tier male zombie, so without hesitation, he combined that zombie with Swordsman Ah Chi. In this way, Swordsman Ah Chi became a 5th-tier zombie. Not only did he synthesize Swordsman Ah Chi to a 5th-tier zombie, but he also created a 5th-tier female zombie. Yi Li was very satisfied, and it seemed that there were no zombies left in his area. As evening fell, Yi Li and Luo Yu walked slowly along the path in the starry night. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.